Back on Ask the AD, back for another time to answer your questions with the Director of Athletics, Gene Taylor. I'm Brian Smoller, Producer Director Preston Kerner, also alongside. Glad you could join us. We got plenty to get to on what will be an explosive, controversial edition of Ask the AD. Potentially, I don't know about that. We'll get into your questions here. And the first thing we're going to get into, before we get into the answers from fans, I thought I'd ask you about, because the last time that we talked, which was in mid-July, conference realignment was in the midst of going on. It's still going on in some respects, but here we stand a couple of months later. What's your take on the Big 12 and its future, I suppose?
Well, I think, first of all, our commissioner, I think we talked about this, he's being very aggressive. Now, what does that mean? Is he calling schools? And I don't know that we're doing that. I think we're just kind of monitoring the landscape. If you follow what the Big Ten commissioner has said publicly, he has said they're not done with expansion. How would that affect us in terms of, would there be any schools out there interested in joining the Big 12? So right now we're really focused on us in terms of the 12, and then Texas and Oklahoma to determine then what's their exit time period. Does it stay the 24-25, which I think it continues to look that way. And then what is the landscape as things change across college athletics? But he's always talking. He's talking to commissioners, and I think we're in a great place right now. And we announced just last week or so that we're going early to negotiate with our TV partners. That could add into the mix. So there's a lot of chess pieces being moved around. But I think we're in a great position if expansion comes our way to have an opportunity.
I know that you have been asked that question multiple times. I'm sure you get it in the grocery store, you get it around. I mean, how often a day are you asked about conference realignment, or does NIL or football team take precedent over?
Yeah, quite a bit. I mean, obviously, people are pretty respectful if I'm out publicly, but if I'm at a meeting, I was at a meeting last night with some Manhattan Catbackers, and those were big topics: NIL, conference realignment. Just our conference commissioner. So. But the people are interested, and that's a good thing. I like the fact that they're interested. They want to know, they want to understand it, and hopefully I can help explain that a little bit.
Well, that's the great thing about the Big 12. Full stadiums, passionate fan bases that have packed it out, and so far the conference flexing its muscle through week one. And speaking of football, great start by the Wildcats, no doubt, opening up against South Dakota. Expecting another sellout this week against Missouri. We've got some other football stuff to get to, but coaches like to talk about from game one to game two is the most improvement, and that goes for us as well in the fan experience business of trying to make the best experience for fans possible. A couple of conversation topics around that. The first was there was a video that went viral about trash in the new area for students in the parking lot over by the rec. I guess let's start there with trash in the new area.
Well, first of all, let me say that it was a tremendous atmosphere against South Dakota. As you mentioned, we were sold out. The energy in the stadium was phenomenal. So, 95% of the evening went great. And, you're always going to have opening jitters, just as football teams do, we do. They don't always flow as well as the operations staff or the marketing staff would go. But overall, I was very, very pleased with everything, obviously being sold out. But yeah, there was a couple of things post-game, near where our students, we created a new student tailgate area that they weren't as respectful as we would have liked in terms of monitoring their trash post game. It was similar to when they were over in Lot 9, but we're gonna correct that. We're gonna reach out to them and remind them to they have certainly there are going to be trash bins, additional trash barrels out there to help pick up after themselves. So that wasn't a huge deal. I mean. And our fans have been great. Usually, if you look through the tailgate lots, they do a lot of self-policing, so we're going to ask the students to do the same.
Well, speaking of the students, the other thing that's been kind of going back and forth on Twitter is the chant. And boy, this seems to have been a topic, not just football-related, basketball-related as well for, it feels like a decade.
Yeah, it probably has been, Brian, and it's real frustrating, to be honest with you. I don't know. We're going to continue to work and make sure. We want our students to lead it. I mean, there are a lot of students in that section that don't want the chant. It's disrespectful, in my opinion. It's not anything our athletes want. It doesn't fire them up. Some traditions, now they've started with the Wabash, and I'm really concerned that if that continues, we'll be able to continue that tradition because they're chanting it to the Wabash, which again is, I think, disrespectful to that song. It doesn't show who we are as an athletic department, as a university.
Well, hopefully people can, as you said, the respect factor tune into that and maybe turn things around in that regard. All right, the last thing about the stadium experience has been about beer sales, and again, this is another topic that we seem to have been endlessly talking about for years. I, I know that you're still in the evaluation process of that, but one of the questions that gets brought up, and maybe the point here needs to be thought and maybe just explained by you a little bit, is it one or the other, beer sales in the stadium versus re-entry back at halftime?
Yeah, that's it. My opinion, not only my opinion, but our staff's, and then just operationally, right? If we're going to create beer sales, then that's a good thing for our concessionaire. We had probably our largest concession sales that we've had in 3 or 4 years on Saturday night. Part of it is because of the areas we have created with beer sales. And so if you're going to exit and re-entry, then and still have beer sales, you're going to reduce your beer sales because people aren't going to spend, the money in the concession stands. And then that just adds more issues, because if you go outside and pound 3 or 4 and a powered drink, then you're going to come back in and be able to drink. So it's a safety thing. It's also a control issue. So yeah, if we're going to provide beer sales in the stadium, we would not allow for exit and re-entry.
And if fans have an opinion on that matter, I'm sure they've already weighed in, but continue to send in, I guess.
And we'll do those kind of things in the
right.
end of the year surveys. They'll have that chance, absolutely.
All right, so from that to a different subject matter regarding the football team, Missouri is this weekend, expecting another sellout crowd, standing room only tickets still available, but it should be an electric environment. And while it's not the hated rivalry of perhaps of the school up the road, or even in Nebraska, which was an arch rival back in the day, it is still a good rivalry game. The question was asked, and this is from @AceEdwards00, is there any interest from the athletic department I'm sorry, this is actually from Bob Trollsby. Is there any plan to reunite any other former conference foes aside from Colorado in non-conference football?
When we got the Missouri game, that was one of the things we were looking for. As you know, the Big 12 conference rule right now is you have to play a non-conference Power 5 opponent, which I think is a great idea. And, we've had Mississippi State, we've had Auburn, we've had US, we've had some great opponents. And so Missouri came along. It was a great opportunity. And so, yes, we'd love to look at a Nebraska, maybe an Iowa someday, or Colorado, or those kind of teams. The challenge is we are booked out till 2030 for those games. And these other teams that we would be interested in are also booked out for a long period of time. So, unless there's a break in the schedule or they lose a game, then I think, we'll continue to look at games, regional rivalries, like Missouri, like Nebraska. But finding those just aren't as easy as we would like it to be. And so, but if something happens and we can make that work, absolutely.
With the conference realignment stuff, circling back to that a little bit, as the conference moves forward and other conferences move forward, there has been talk of adding conference games. What other factors go into that?
I think that's a great point. If we were to expand as a conference, for instance, and we were to look to play more than 9 conference games, or maybe 10, or if other conferences go to more, I think the SEC is at 8. If they were to go to 9 or 10, that takes away those games that you might want to schedule. So a lot of it's tied in together. And now you have the CFP expansion, coming down the road. And what does that play into? Is it better to play more in-conference games, or is it better to go out and play a Power 5, or just play all Power 5s and not, even play FCS schools anymore? So all of that's going to play into the fact once we get into expansion. So it's going to be an interesting time over the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's not going to end anytime soon. And the CFP could not be resolved for another couple of years as well.
Right.
All right, now to the question from @AceEdwards00, which is about adding another sport to the athletic department. Another question that we seemingly get almost every time.
Yeah.
I'm almost to the point where we're going to clip this out and save it evergreen on every Ask the AD. But the sports that were talked about were softball and wrestling. But in general, we picked Ace Edwards' question because, in general, for anyone that has this question about adding sports, what are some of the challenges and considerations that go into that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, our budget is one of the smallest in the Big 12, operational dollars and revenue. And so anytime you add a sport, there's startup costs with, the building, for instance. If you're going to add softball, you got to build a stadium. And then just the startup costs for salaries and scholarships and all that. And so if we're at, an $84 million budget and we were at a sport or 2 sports, that's several $1 million. Well, where's that money going to come from? Well, we don't, unless we get a lot more revenue coming in from somewhere, then that money is going to have to come from the sports we currently host, and then their budgets are going to be less. So, we're a very efficient department, so adding sports right now just doesn't make a lot of sense from a financial perspective. I guess if we were to get a windfall of TV revenue and to the tune of the Big Ten, and you're going from 40 to 70 or 80 million dollars, possibility. But right now, we're great with the sports we have, and we need to stay focused and making those as successful as we can.
Yeah, that's well said. And thank you again for the time, and appreciate being able to answer all these questions. And it's not easy, right? I mean, a lot of this stuff is, people think an AD's job is easy sometimes, right? It's not.
It's actually not that hard. It's just, something that sometimes keeps me on my toes. That's all there is.
And we're looking forward to basketball season and basketball practice starting around the corner. No excitement at an all-time high for Jerome Tang and his team, the women's team, even despite the loss of Ayoka Lee, still expecting big things. Before you know it, we'll be talking basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. So appreciate everybody, and keep buying tickets for our games, because I think we got a good, exciting season ahead.
Absolutely. And while Missouri is sold out in standing room only, tickets remain for the Tulane game. That's Fort Riley Day, which is an annual celebration and a lot of fun. You can always donate and resale your tickets through StubHub to soldiers of Fort Riley or anybody else that's in need and wants to go to a game and have them be in purple in your seats. Gene, thanks for the time.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
For producer-director Preston Kerner, for Gene Taylor, I'm Brian Smuller. Thanks for watching Ask the AD.